Tanzania, this is Mr. Juvent or Mr. Concepts, and this is a central concepts session. Today I'm having a concept under the same subject, that is chemistry, and the same topic, volumetric analysis. This time is lesson number 4, talking about the mole, the concept of a mole. Now please, I'm pretty sure that you have been following me since then, in part 1, part 2, part 3. It is part 4 now. Please, if you are ready, let's go. Now, a mole, first by the meaning, by definition, a mole is the amount of substance which contains as many elementary particles as there are carbon atoms in 12 grams of carbon 12 isotope. Some are complicated, but then you can play back and then you get it better. Now, in most of cases we say that a mole is used as a unit in counting very small particles of substances. Very small particles of substances. And a mole as a unit is used as similar as we count things in groups. Substances that can be, or objects that can be counted one by one, can be counted in groups of 2, in groups of 12, in groups of 144, in groups of 500, and there we find the units such as a pair being 2 objects, a group of 2 objects. For example, this one is a pair, this one 2. Measuring cylinders. This is a pair of measuring cylinders. 2 objects makes a pair. But if 12 objects, like for example, these ones are 12 test tubes. We call this set a dozen of test tubes. 12 test tubes, a dozen of test tubes. If objects are counted to 144, look, these ones are tubes, they are counting 144. So we call this one a gross. So this one is a gross of tubes, But if things counts up to 500 objects, we call them a ring. For example, we students, professionals, teachers, we do use these things, papers in this package. These papers are 500 pieces of papers inside. They are written 500 sheets. 500, you can see written 500 sheets. Which means this package forms a rim of papers. So a package of 500 objects is given a group name rim. So these units, a pair, a dozen, a gross, a rim, are the units used to count objects that can be counted one by one, that you can pick one by one. So a pair of people, a gross of cars, a rim of tables, a gross of people. So things that can be counted one by one can be counted in those units. But then we have very small objects that you can't. It is not possible to pick one by one, that you form a pair of those objects, that you form a gross, or you form a dozen, or you form a rim. For example, this is a powder, that powder we used to apply on our skin. It is a powder, it is written Tecum powder written. We used to apply this one on our skin. It is a common powder that you use to apply on your skin. Now this powder is having very small particles, tiny particles. Maybe I show you one. Let me get some and then I show you. See, tiny particles. So when you try to rub on your with your fingers, you find they are really not scratching. Very small. Maybe I ask you, do you think it is possible to pick one particle powder from here one particle of a powder from here, so that you make one powder particle, and then you pick the second, you put it there with the other, so that we have a pair of particles, or at least you pick 12 particles of powder, that you form a dozen of powder. Or do you think it is possible to count 144 particles of powder, so that you have a gross of powder or a rim of powder? Pretty sure it is not possible. I'm pretty sure that it is not possible. Now, very small particles like these ones, but also this one is wheat flour, the same size, wheat flour. That one you use at your home for baking bites. This one is wheat flour. Also, it is having very small particles, that it is not possible to pick one particle of wheat flour. You put it over there, just a single particle, and then you pick the second to form a pair, to form a dozen of 12, to form a gross of 144, to form a group of 500 rim. It is not really possible. But then, these ones are counted in a group of millions of particles. Very small particles like these ones are counted in a group of millions. So you can just fetch. You just fetch like this, that you fetch the particles from each container, you just fetch. Now can you tell how many particles do I have over here? It is not possible to tell. It is a millions of particles. Now, these small particles are counted in a group of millions of particles called a mole. Now, for substance or for particles to attain a mole, the particles should have the total number of particles should reach the following. Maybe I started like a pair of objects. A pair is made by two objects. Let us do like this. Two objects forms a pair. One dozen will be formed by 12 objects. 12 objects. But one gross is formed by 144 objects. 144 objects. But then a rim of car, a rim of people, a rim of students, a rim of papers, a rim of any object that you can count one by one. So a rim is formed by 500 objects. 500 objects. Now, a mole. The unit that counts very small particles, is formed by how much number of particles? One mole of particles, 1 mole of substance, 1 mole is formed by the substances 602. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Now look at this number. You can tell yourself how much is that number of particles. Very big number. So that's why I've said that particles like these ones, very small particles, are counted in a group of millions. Of numbers, many number of particles. Now simply, this one can be written in a standard form. Is that one you see, you find in the documents and the books written like 6.02 times 10 power 23. This number in standard form, mathematically, we do write it in a simple way like this. So that one is 1 mole. So 1 mole is having 60.02 times 10 power 23 particles. Now, a mole is used to count very small. In chemistry, we do use the unit mole to count things like electrons, number of atoms, number of molecules, number of ions. Very small, like those ones, are counted in a unity mole. In a unity mole. Now, to sum up, this number 60.0, 2 times 10 power 23 particles is scientifically known as Avogadro's constant. Avogadro's constant. It is called the Avogadro's constant or Avogadro's number. It is called the Avogadro's number. So it is written like Avogadro's number constant. Avogadro's constant. So somebody may simply define a mole. A mole is the amount of substance that contains Avogadro's number of particles. A mole is a substance that contains Avogadro's number of particles. Please, let me end up there, and I'm asking you to make a follow-up upon my next talk. That will be talking on how do we determine the total mass of the what? Of the chemical formula like this one. How do we determine the total mass of the compound? How do we get this 98? How do we get this 40? Now, before that lesson, you need to have been calculated and have the total mass of this chemical formula, that is glucose. Thank you for listening, and make a follow-up upon my next talk.